And we are back together for the fourth panel named The Role of MIL in Empowering Journalism Online. This is our last panel, so once again, I encourage you to type any comments or questions you might have using chat, using Q&A, whatever you find that fits you. During this panel, we will explore the tools developed by media to help citizens access reliable information. We will be speaking with journalists, professors, people who have been directly, whether educating or creating these tools for the public to be able to gain reliable information among all the information that we are daily exposed to. We will be hearing 6 panelists: Marina Tuneva, who is an executive director of the Council for MediaEthics in North Macedonia; Bojan Cvejic, who is an editor-in-chief of the web portal Danas; Ozgün, Ozcer, and sorry if I'm destroying your name by my pronunciation, I'm trying really hard. Ozgün is a project coordinator at Platform for Independent Journalism P24; Auffarth, who is a project coordinator of the Journalism Trust Initiative at the Press Freedom Watchdogs, Reporters Without Borders; Jasna Jelisic, who is the head of the Western Balkans Task Force at European External Action Service; and Erkan Saka, who is an associate professor at the Istanbul Bilgi University. Thank you all for being a part of this panel today, and as I've said, we are looking forward to hear, given your experience and your knowledge from the media, to hear your opinion on the topics we have been discussing during the day. For the beginning of the panel, I would like to invite Ms. Marina Tuneva to answer a couple of questions. Of course, let's begin with a quick technical check. You can hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much. Could you briefly introduce us with the work of Media Council in North Macedonia?
Yes, the Media Ethics Council in North Macedonia is an organization, actually civil society organization, established in 2014. And since then, we've been active in processing press complaints we receive from the audience related to unethical and unprofessional media reporting. But in addition to the press complaints processing, we realized that it's needed to expand the mission of the organization and to be actively involved in these different processes related to improvement of media professionalism, encouraging professional media practices, but also in media literacy efforts from the perspective of our press council to be able to help the audiences and citizens make a distinction between reliable and unprofessional reporting and information, to be able to also actively take part in not just in the media self-regulation, but in establishing direct links with the media themselves and work together on improving professional media practices. As an organization, we also realize that it's quite important to work with different actors and different stakeholders, and we want to feel like we are part of a system which is committed to combating, encountering disinformation and different types of information disorder. Therefore, we as an organization established a kind of a coalition or a network on addressing hate speech in the media with stakeholders from the civil society, regulatory authorities, judiciary, academia, professional media community, etc., to be able to discuss this phenomena and these issues together and try to act together in gradual resolving of these problems.
Well, how important it is to have all of these different stakeholders, what you said, if forming a coalition, is it a path that cannot be walked through without all of these stakeholders involved?
Well, actually, yeah, this is a very important question from my perspective, because we realize that as a press council and as a media self-regulatory body, we are unable to deal with disinformation, fake news, one-sided reporting ourselves only. We realize that it's important to fight with these problems in a coordinated manner. So if the regulatory authority is competent to work with the media to implement the law efficiently, then why shouldn't we involve them? Why shouldn't we involve the judiciary? Why shouldn't we involve the civil society sector, which is quite active in this country in implementing programs related to media and information literacy? Our message that we want to convey as an organization is that we need to work together because a systematic approach is needed, and in this way we would be more efficient. It's insufficient if we only publish our adjudications which identify if there were breaches of the professional code or not. Some citizens might come across this information and read our adjudications, but this is not sufficient. And also, work with the media requires also a coordinated approach where media will equally feel like they're partners in the process. And we are not an organization that only wants to judge about the way they work, about the way they report. We want to feel them as partners, even in the initiatives which mean spreading media literacy objectives among the public. So treating all relevant stakeholders equally in this process is quite an important step, and we need to continue coordinating. Media self-regulation is actually a new concept in our country, existing here for already 7 years, is both efficient, but also, let's say, in certain ways, something that needs more attention, or something that needs that should lead to visible results on a long term as well. Therefore, promotion of self-regulation should also come from different stakeholders, not just by us as an organization that is quite active in raising the awareness of the audience about the existence of this kind of body and about the goals that we have as an organization, but also we need partners from the other fields, like the CSOs, as I mentioned, academia, researchers, higher education institutions, judiciary, etc., etc.
Thank you very much, Marina, for sharing the experience of work of Media Council in North Macedonia, and also the idea of this synergy between different people who have the responsibility in the process to work together in order to achieve the goal. I would like to invite Mr. Bojan Cvejic to be our next panelist. Hi, Bojan, can you hear me?
Čujem.
Okay, thank you. Bojan, my question for you, now we see that the pandemic has influenced the work of the media across the region as well. What steps have you taken at the Danas newspapers to ensure that the public is given reliable information?
Dobar dan svima. Ja se izvinjam na početku što ću pričati na maternjem jeziku, jer imam veliku tremu kada treba ovako javno da pričam na engleskom, ali sam sreća imam ovaj prevod, pa sam zato odlučio da ću bolje da kažem ono što treba. Što se tiče liste Danas i našeg portala, ja moram da kažem da smo mi zapravo i tokom pandemije... Do you hear me? Translation. Yes, I tried. Okay. The Danas Daily and our website in the pandemic time we was doing our job like every day before, because we are the one of the rarely professional media in Serbia, because we have a lot of tabloid and propaganda.
Hocam selamlar.
Yeah.
Ya hocam şimdi UNESCO paneline bağlanıyorum.
I'm sorry.
We'll go through that as well. I'm sorry,
Can I continue?
just a reminder for all of the other participants, please, the panelists, please keep your microphones turned off when somebody is speaking. Thank you. Bojan, please continue.
In English or in Serbian? Yes, okay.
Ja ću
Okay.
vas prevoditi na engleski. Okay. Okay, he'll talk in Serbian. I'll translate into English. Can you hear me? My English translation? It's okay? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I can't hear. I didn't either.
These are all the beauties of working online. We should be improving maybe some of our information literacy as well. Bojan, can you hear me?
Okay.
Language you want. Yes.
Ja sad čujem, nisam čuo, samo ne čujem moderatorku.
Yes, he could not hear the moderator earlier, but now it's okay.
Well, this is actually really exciting. Can you hear me now, Bojan?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Just like not Chinese or something like that, whatever, whichever of these two languages suit you, please go on.
Yeah, thankfully we have. It's okay. I mean, I don't mind.
Like I said,
Speak.
Yes, we worked like every day before pandemic of coronavirus. Sorry, and we have amazing results during the pandemic. We have on our web portal from the first day when the pandemic starts in Serbia, we have twice more visits on our website than before. And we have some conclusion that we are doing our job, our professional journalism well, because we saw that the people and our readers believe us when we publish some information.
Okay, well, thank you, and sorry for all the interruptions. Well, back to the topic of media and information literacy. You said that newspapers, danas, are one of the most reliable news outlets in Serbia. But on the other side, do you think that you have citizens who are sufficiently equipped with critical thinking skills to debunk disinformation within the media, which are not reliable? Are citizens well equipped to distinguish reliable from unreliable information?
I'm not sure, and I don't have some concrete information, but we saw that the people and citizens in Serbia during the pandemic searching for some reliable information. And we had that we have a lot of new readers in the last 1.5 years, because the citizens in Serbia are being confused from a lot of this information and disinformation. And as I said, they searching for some reliable and some real news, real information.
And when it comes to the media themselves, are journalists and the media sufficiently equipped with digital skills to provide fact-checking, data journalism, and so on?
Yes, I think that some media has some digital skills for that. But as I said, we at Danas Daily, we have some traditional journalism, and we have some traditional fact-checking methods for some information. And I think that in pandemic, the media in Serbia and in the region finally had some educational how to say, educational role in society, because it is one of the main role of media in theory. But now we can do it in practice, and we became the, how to say, we became to
educate people next to giving them information.
Yes, of course.
And I hope that this confusion at least threw away the anxiety while speaking English, because you were great, and thank you. And sorry once again for the technical confusion. It's all a part of the job, unfortunately. So our third speaker for the day, for this panel, not for the day, for this panel, is Mr. Ozgün Ozcer. Once again, my sincere apologies for probably not saying the name correctly. Mr. Ozcer, you are project coordinator at the Platform for Independent Journalism, P24. And my question for you is, what is this platform doing when it comes to media and information literacy in Turkey?
Or rather trying to do, let's say. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to get away from our Turkish bubble, even for a short while, and even virtually. So as you said, I'm speaking as a journalist and coordinator for the Platform for Independent Journalism. It is P24 is a media NGO based in Istanbul. It was founded in 2013. We currently are running several programs, mostly on press freedom. We do spend a lot of time in courtrooms, actually, on fighting against censorship, on cultural journalism, and more recently on developing climate journalism. We have also published several online guidelines on journalism, just like News University. So this is one of the ways we're trying to promote people, to helping them to access to good practices in journalism. And a great way of doing this is preparing these guidelines, because people who prepare those guidelines also become specialists of that topic when they prepare it. It's not only good for people who read it, it's also promotes specialization when there are people who have spent a lot of time in certain topics without pretending to be a specialist on this issue, and we allow them to become the not the spokesperson, but the person who could share their experiences to other people. We have also collaborated with UNESCO in the past, in now several projects actually, in making assessment about self-regulation in Turkey, which is one of the biggest issues in journalism and can become quickly political, as well as MIL policies in Turkey. So we have 3 years ago already coordinated a national consultation conference with academics, journalists, fact checkers, and educators, and the result of which was a position paper, which I have here, there, and which included a lot of recommendations. Now, making recommendations doesn't mean that those will be applied at all. So we are now currently in partnership in the Trust in Media project that is founded, I believe, by the European Union and coordinated with UNESCO. And we're looking to understand further how we can improve awareness of fighting against misinformation and developing good practices in fact-checking, especially in newsrooms, more than anything else.
As you've just said, you are, P24 is involved in the project Building Trust in Media in Southeast Europe and Turkey. Could you give us an insight about the work that you do specifically when it comes to addressing online disinformation and also restoring or building trust in the media?
Well, yes. So I think I should before say as a disclaimer that media in Turkey has been really under significant political and economic pressure for years, and that's the least we can say. But independently of that fact, Turkish media can hardly claim a glorious record in terms of misinformation. And this is due with methodology and practices. Fact-checking and thorough reporting were never the strength of Turkish media, and the current context has further undermined it. Trust in media has been decreasing over the years, and misinformation is really a rampant problem. So we talk today, I think we referred a lot to the pandemic, as I heard, and this is an important indicator. If I ask how many actively employed public health reporters or editors there were in Turkey when the pandemic commenced, the answer is 0. And what happened actually? And business as usual, which means a huge cacophony of news stories, sometimes irrelevant and sometimes contradictory. And you can't even say that those were curated. Only the fact-checking organization Tate.org took the step to have a dedicated editor to debunk false information on COVID. And their fact-checking reports also help to improve not only media information literacy, but also science literacy, which should be something that, newsrooms cared at the time. So what they do now with these projects, we do some trainings, and what we try to do is also to train people not only for fact checking, but also on on certain topics like climate journalism or science journalism, to raise awareness and to explain them the methodologies of checking facts while preparing a news story. But we are also we are also aware that certain practices have to be implemented at the level of newsrooms. And for that fact, when there is a national consultation, everybody agrees on what should be done. But neither fact-checking and media information literacy are magical concepts per se. They're not synonyms for abracadabra, and they need to be implemented. And for that, now we are making interviews with people who run news rooms and news managers, editor-in-chiefs. We also make interviews with editors, and we are making interviews with fact-checkers, trying to assess what the problems are. And we will prepare a report based on these answers and make further recommendations, but more turn to day-to-day practices, if you want.
Thank you very much, Ozgün, for sharing, what you have begun with. So it kind of leads us to the conclusion that you are managing to do all this work, even though it's not as easy as it might be in other environments. So thank you for sharing your work, your methodology, and your ideas on how to address the question of media literacy information as a journalist and as a project coordinator. I would like to invite Ms. Lea Auffarth now to be our next speaker. Lea works as a project coordinator, as I've said, as JTI Journalism Trust Initiative. Okay, let's begin with a technical check. Lea, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
So what is JTI Journalism Trust Initiative, and how does this initiative concretely relate to the idea of media and information literacy? How does it help citizens? How does it help those who may acquire information from you on how to distinguish reliable from non-reliable information?
So the JTI, the Journalism Trust Initiative, is slightly different from what we've heard so far, as in we're not really looking into fight disinformation by chasing malicious actors or deleting or countering harmful content, but we're following the approach of actively supporting the good. So the next question would be, what is good journalism? And the Journalism Trust Initiative has compiled numerous professional standards that already exist in the community. We didn't reinvent them, and they're not to be replaced. They have just been compiled in a standard that allows to add 2 layers to the already existing environment, which is compliance, which means that newsrooms and journalists can look at themselves and disclose information about their structural, operational level of journalism, then see if they're in compliance, share this information with their audience. And the second element is that it can turn into a machine-readable signal that can be fed into search engines or news feeds. So I think the second big difference is that the Journalism Trust Initiative is not looking at the content level of journalism, but really much at the structural level. So basically educating the audience about who is, for example, financing the journalism or the media outlet, and what are the editorial guidelines, what is the mission statement. So literacy basically through that approach.
How do ethical and transparency standards, which you've just spoke about, play in making journalism competitive in the digital age?
Well, I mean, it's of course it's a big issue, the economic approach. But what we see is that there is money, for example, in advertising, and there is money in subscription. The only issue is that it's not going to the right sources. And by the right sources or recipients, I mean trustworthy journalists that are working in the public interest and that are not distributing false information. So with the JTI standard, the media outlets can disclose their trustworthiness, which is not only interesting for potential subscribers, but also for advertisers or potential donors in the media development sectors, or, for example, for training. If a media outlet has seen that there is a lack in certain fields, just as Ozgün mentioned, they might not have correction policies on certain topics or fact-checking policies, then they could ask for training on that field and have clear indicators to see if they have achieved something.
Thank you. Yes. Now, when it comes to the general, something that kind of is constantly in my mind while we speak of this topic. On one side, as you've explained it at the beginning, we have the energy which is being directed towards debunking false information, educating people how to do it themselves, and then on the other side, I mean, those are not necessarily opposite sides, but they include different actions. You have supporting and highlighting the media who do their jobs professionally with high ethical standards and so on. But what is my current question is, where are people who consume media in between all of this? What do you have, like, not necessarily very precise information, but like a frame, just like a framework of the idea, how much do people trust media today? But I'm thinking you are able to understand in the context we are speaking of, why is this question important?
Okay, so something we do see is that there is a certain level of media literacy, but a lot of times there's also a lack of information. So if you don't really know where the information is coming from, what vested interests there might be, for example, who is the owner of the media outlet, where are the revenues of the media outlet coming from, then it is very hard to take an educated choice. So what we're trying with the Journalism Trust Initiative is to basically provide these information by a structured imprint, by a transparency report, or a certificate once the media outlet is audited against the standard, that media outlets can voluntarily publish on their website, and disclose, and with that enable their readers further to understand and make educated choices.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lea, for sharing all of this information and all of these experiences that come from your side of the job and from your side of the approach towards media and information literacy. I would now like to invite Ms. Jasna Jelisic to be our next speaker. She is the head of Western Balkans Task Force. So we could begin with the question of giving us a closer insight on what it is that this task force does and how is it related to the topics of media and information literacy.
Thank you, Hannah. Indeed, Western Balkans Task Force core business is to support European Union policy in the Western Balkans. And as you know, this is the enlargement policy. And within that, providing strategic communication support. That means a lot of different things. And I'm also looking at the time, I will not go into all the details. But one detail that is crucially important in light of today's discussion is related to information manipulation and very often foreign interference, where we see that, as we observe it in the Western Balkans, that exactly has a chance to obstruct the ambition of the people in the Western Balkans to join the EU. And this is the framework of why we are engaged and in which way we get to look into these issues. Following your previous fascinating panel, I must say, a lot from the youth ambassadors to everybody else was very eloquent talking about definitions, but I also wanted to remind the audience, we started discussing these issues talking about fake news. And then the specialists and people in this field started using misinformation and disinformation and mixing the two. And now when we see and we follow the discussions, then it's fake news, misinformation, and disinformation, and everybody is using different terms. Without going into all the different definitions, I think now we are fully into the phase where all of this can be seen within this information manipulation sphere. And disinformation and misinformation is part of it. I just felt this is really important, clarifying and also putting in the context that information manipulation as such is very often, and when we talk about Western Balkans, and our team looks into that, is a part of the hybrid influence combo, and in that context, it should be watched. So this is what we are trying to understand first, what is happening. So the full understanding what is happening in the information environment is the first thing, and then goes everything that needs to be done. And building the resilience of the local population, exactly what was the discussion of today's conference, critical thinking and media literacy is one of the key areas. It is not a silver bullet, but is absolutely essential for dealing with these issues. So we as a task force provide strategic advice, what to be supported. And I was happy to see that a lot of these projects that we suggested to be basically, we are not into business of telling people what to think. We want people in the Western Balkans to be able to think for themselves and to have and be capable to equip themselves to engage and to be exposed to critical thinking and media literacy and differentiate between all of these different areas. So in that sense, I wanted to say that this info manipulation has a special importance for the Western Balkans. And it's also important to say that it's not new to the region. It's not new anywhere, nor it's a specificity of the Western Balkans. The Western Balkans suffered a lot from info manipulation and disinformation in the 90s during the wars, before the war, during the war, and after the war. This is just now, it used to be analog and now it's digital. So it has a different layers and different ways in which it needs to be tackled. So what we as a task force also try to understand how the strategic objective and the desire of the people can be obstructed in the way how they want to live. It can be affected by these info manipulation operations. So what we see is that very often these operations want to discourage people from demanding the changes that need to happen in order for these countries to join the European Union. There are a lot of false narratives or parallel narratives. And in that sense, having both young people, but also older generations being able to think for themselves and recognize what is a poisonous content and what is real journalism is critically important. And this is where we put a lot of our efforts. Even in the previous century, when I was a journalist, and before all of this was such a popular topic, I remember also as a professional, I wouldn't read everything. I would first check who wrote it, and then would devote my time to read a certain article when it was on paper, when there was no web content or social media content and so on. So the issues are still the same, and the need for engaging at many levels. And there is no point in simplifying this issue, is very important. We need fully committed governments to do what they can to tackle this issue. We need a fully devoted professional media community. We need a space for the functioning of the professional media community, and the whole society being engaged in dealing with this issue. There is no silver bullet.
Thank you for your answer, and I must admit that I was highly focused on doing some maths in my head when you said that you were a journalist in the last century, if I heard that right. So yeah, that was like something that really caught my attention. But then, related to that, I would like to ask you: do you think that this relationship trust, basically the trust of journalists towards media, you gave us the example of how you checked every info while working as a journalist. Now, do journalists trust media today? And are journalists kind of, do they have this connection with the fact-checking society and other members of this process of gaining correct information and reliable information? Are these connections developed? Are they necessary? Or should the journalists be well-equipped to do all the work by themselves?
For me, fact-checking is an integral part of good professional journalism. And I think I don't see a problem on the basis of now years of observation, when we now have a professional line of business, which is called fact-checking, to check the content. I don't see a tension between fact-checkers and professional journalists. I see a tension between fact-checkers and content producers posturing as journalists. And I think this is the key for our debate, and it's a core of media literacy and critical thinking business. Now, with the appearance of digital content, I don't even use the term media for all of them, and social. It's called social media. It's social interactions between people who are not journalists, and that needs to be fact-checked. This is not professional journalism. Professional journalism in the basics is about collecting informations in an ethical way and distributing them in public interest. Everything else outside of that basic definition is other professions, PR business, and some other lines of business, but it's not journalism. And that's why it's also important to have an environment in which, in an open, pluralistic debate, society can determine what the public interest is, and professional media need to participate in all of that and help its articulation. So in that sense, I would say it's absolutely essential to have the fact-checking business. It's a necessary thing, considering that there is a lot of content that is posturing as journalistic content. And when people really do not see a difference, they don't know very often that in order to, they need to check whether there is an impressum with a clear editorial policy, that there is a code of conduct, whether the producers of the content on certain web page are following the standards of ethical journalism, are they self-regulating, are they a part, if they're electronic media, are they adhering to the regulation of the, for example, broadcasting. So I would say that journalists and fact checkers, real journalists, real professional journalists and fact checkers are one in my book. Professional journalists check their facts, while we need fact checkers to check everything else.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jalisic, for sharing your experiences and insights on the topic. And our final speaker on this panel is Mr. Erkan Saka, who is an associate professor at Bilgi Istanbul University. Probably didn't pronounce that right, but I'm trying. Give me credit for that. Mr. Saka, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. And you?
Great, thank you. So let's speak of how has the, if it has, how has the spread of disinformation changed in Turkey in the last years, in particularly in light of social media?
Well, as an academic, it's hard to generalize mostly, but these are some of my observations is, in one way or another, even if we don't like, sometimes we criticize, there was this journalistic authority. And now this, as my friend, colleague mentioned, Ozgün mentioned, there is this sort of collapse of Turkish journalism because of many reasons. This means citizens rightfully lose their trust in the media that was once called mainstream media. And when there is no trust in a journalistic authority, then this can be easily replaced by new actors that use social media platforms. This is a case since the emergence of social media. But in general, if there is still a journalistic authority there, trusted authority, this still guides many citizens. But if that trust is lost, then it's open, in an open field. So there are truth wars, claims. And then citizens have their own initiatives. If there is still some journalism done in Turkey, with the, of course, help of professional, experienced journalists and some citizens, these are thanks to citizen initiatives mostly, and also fact checking, which is sometimes interesting. It's a given thing for journalism, but if that authority collapses, then there must be some others. So there are some initiatives who do the fact checking, and some of them got very successful, and that's a nice thing. But still, the scene is very heterogeneous, very not really hard to. There are so many echo chambers in a way, and this is a very good venue for disinformation, basically, unfortunately. And plus, this is the scene, and then we see the pandemic. And Ozgün mentioned in between lines about science journalism or science communication. This wasn't a much issue before, and pandemic just shaped shaped the context. And now we are not very much used to deal with scientific communication, and also professional journalists or citizen journalists, anyone. And this gives us a new field of disinformation. And so the scene is now, we are also trying to deal with that. Of course, I guess, and one more thing is that about the refugee crisis. I assume until maybe pandemic, it was more or less controlled by, how can I say, I didn't see that level of hate speech or disinformation towards refugees. But as the authority collapse, journalistic authority, now we see more disinformation towards them. And unfortunately, opposition began to see that they can exploit this. So most of the time, we could attribute this information to the pro-government circles. But now it is also complicated. Some oppositional figures or circles are also mining the field with disinformation against especially refugees. That's what I can say in general. Yeah.
Thank you, Erkan, for giving us
You're welcome.
this insight. I mean, not only on the state of media, but also how it relates to different social and political changes and their dynamics. Now, focusing like a bit more specifically on online journalism, do you can you identify at this point of time what could be the biggest challenges that online journalism is facing?
Well, I think Ozgün, my friend, already implied there is definitely a pressure. And you know, if the scene and independent journalism, by definition, it's smaller size and its power is limited compared to bigger media organizations. This means they are more open to, they are more subject to legal pressures. So we definitely have legal challenges here. Secondly, so I'm not repeating what our friends already told. And secondly, from a more proactive maybe perspective, we need business models. I mean, this is a global problem, definitely. This is not only a local Turkey-based thing. And I think independent journalism, online journalism is really in search for some financial survivability. Some funding is definitely helps, but I think they have to find their ways to go beyond external funding. More community-based, maybe reader-based support systems. Everyone tries, and this is in parallel to other countries, I'm sure. Just that, you know, sometimes you know, your financial initiatives are also prevented by authorities. So even if you find a business model, sometimes it won't work. But at least it seems if you have a model, it might have a chance. At the moment, as far as I can observe, depending on independent funding, and government has already begun to target that. So in near future, we will see that these funding sources might be limited through some legal and other pressures. And thirdly, maybe it seems to be a lesser problem at the moment, but this is about the type of journalism. It's times changing. As I said, you know, we never imagined something like pandemic. So we need to insert sort of new kinds of journalistic knowledge, climate or science communication, climate journalism, or maybe rethinking how to report politics, etc. Well, under these suffering conditions, independent journalists cannot really train themselves that much. But at least I'm hopeful that there are so many citizen initiatives. Sometimes help comes from outside the journalistic circle, and then it has its own problems. You know, sometimes when activism meets with journalism, it provides some unintended consequences, which is not really sometimes preferable, but still, maybe there can be more enlargement of journalistic knowledge, and this can make more readers again more news friendly. I know citizens are quite interested in political news, but there's also this kind of exhaustion with our current news cycle, and with novel ways of reporting, this might help, and we can maybe reach beyond the echo chambers. These are
Thank
the
you
three
very
maybe
much,
major.
Professor
Yeah.
Saka. Yes, I'm not sure if you just said something. Maybe I missed the last words you said.
No. All is fine.
Okay.
I cannot hear you now, but
maybe you do not need to hear me anyway. I'm kidding. I think you can hear me now. Yeah? Okay.
yes, now,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for introducing us with some new elements
You're
at the very end of the conference, which are highly important for the whole concept of media and information literacy, journalism freedom, and everything else that come into this story. And thank you for that. I think it should be definitely taken into consideration when discussing this topic. And for the very end of this panel, I would like to go back just for a minute to Bojan, who I feel I owe it to due to all the technical issues we had during his comments. So Bojan, let's see what happens this time, and let's go with a question of kind of framing everything we spoke about. If you remember at the very beginning, we spoke about the importance of coalitions that need to work together in order for society to benefit in the context of media and information literacy. Now, what happens if you only have specific media, specific journalists with high ethical standards doing their best for people to have reliable information, but then you do not have the support of other roles, institutions, and people who should be in the process? What is it possible to ensure to citizens to understand the values of, valuable journalism?
Yeah, I think that media cannot educate people without a formal educational system. Media literacy must to start from elementary school. That we have to work with the child. We have some media literacy readers. Media have to inform, to get a fun, and to educate our readers. And I think this is the right moment in a crisis situation for it. And because people in crisis situation are searching for real and reliable information, and it is time for professional media to become popular, almost like tabloids. But without the formal education in schools, I think that media cannot do it.
Thank you very much, Bojan. What you've just said brings us back to basically how we started the conference today at 10 a.m., actually 10:30, where we spoke about the importance of integrating MIL into formal education and creating a sustainable format of having MIL as part of elementary, secondary schools, universities, and giving an opportunity for young people to be able to understand the importance of critical thinking, the importance of being able to perceive which information are reliable and which are not. So it kind of frames basically the whole story. I think we can end this panel and the conference as well with the idea that today we have heard so many different stakeholders. We have heard people who on different sides of the process do their jobs. We have heard people from the institutions, people from the media, people from the civil society sector, young people who try to influence their peers. We've heard all of them on the ways they try to achieve the change, on the ways they try to emphasize the importance of media and information literacy. And going back to what I've said at some point during the conference, we should not be discussing which of these approaches is the right one. We should be taking the best out of each so people who need to learn could benefit. We can definitely conclude as a part of this conference that a significantly higher degree of media and information literacy is needed in all of the countries of the Southeast Europe, and that only by including all of the people we have spoke about, all of the pillars that contribute to education, the new generations and the older generations have hope in achieving a better understanding of media and of information they are being exposed to daily. So thank you very much for all of your attention during the day. Thank you for all the comments you've left in the chat. Thank you to all the panelists who were here as a part of the last panel and all of the previous panels as well. Thank you for all your patience during the minor technical issues we had. And I hope you will, take the knowledge from today's event and apply it on wherever you're already working, and help the generations, my and the next generations coming, to be more media and information literate and to live a more responsible and to ask for a more responsible life from the people surrounding them. Thank you once again.